Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome to the start of another reading vlog. This reading vlog I'm really looking forward to. I'm also hoping to have a little more success in the reading department than I've had in my last one in terms of overall enjoyment. So because of that, I'm hedging my bet with 3 very different books from different authors, and we're gonna try to read them all together. So without further ado, let's chat about my TBR. Alrighty guys, as I said, it's a kind of a hefty TBR for this video. Let's talk about them. So first and foremost, I'm currently in the midst of Age of Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. I have about a third of this book left, maybe a bit more, and I'm really into it. I immediately picked this book up after Fourth Wing because I needed a bit of a palate cleanser, and I knew the 6th and final book to the Legends of the First Empire series would be one I would enjoy. It's definitely the case. Given that this book is much later on in the series, I don't want to feature it too heavily in any particular reading vlog, so I'm almost done with it, but I do plan to finish it and I can talk about my overall series thoughts and feelings. From there, I really want to pick up Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. I'm really curious to see how I feel about this author's adult fantasy debut. It is a retelling of Cleopatra and Antony, Shakespeare retelling. I am not a huge fan of this author's YA writing, but I really wanted to give her adult fantasy writing a chance. And then I'm also hoping to start at least Ancillary Justice by Ann Leckie. I feel like I'm gonna love this series so much. It's a revenge tale, it's set in space, I feel like it's gonna be full of conspiracy and drama, all of the things I love. So yeah, we got different vibes going on. We got classic war and conflict pastoral, we have trials and probably angst between 2 main characters, and then sci-fi revenge. Not a bad TBR. Currently Monday afternoon. I'm actually going to sit down and read a bit now because again, I'm really obsessed with Age of Empire and I want to get further. I'm actually going to try to finish this book today. I've already read a good chunk this morning. Like I woke up a good amount before work today just so I could read, but nevertheless, welcome to the start of the vlog. I'm excited for y'all to be here. I have lots of grand plans this week, namely watching movies and cooking and just overall laying low, as I like to do, especially because it's so hot outside. But anyway, let's get started. It's time, Clay.
What's time?
It's time for me to have an afternoon coffee. Hopefully I don't have an existential crisis.
Did you make coffee?
I did.
Yeah.
Hi friends, I'm here with my very first reading update of the vlog. So I had about like 175 pages left of Age of Empire by Michael J. Sullivan, and I quickly read 100 pages this afternoon. So I'm definitely tracking to be able to finish this book tonight. I don't foresee that being a problem at all. The thing about this series is I always read every single one so quickly. There's something about Michael J. Sullivan's writing style and the characters where I just feel immediately drawn in. It's really emotional, uplifting, but also there's like a lot of stakes at play. Like I feel like every other page I'm either like rejoicing in some inspiring, heroic, myth creating moment, and then the next page I am absolutely like distraught by like the actual reality of like what is going on. And that's what I think is so interesting about this series. It's called the Legends of the First Empire series, and it's a prequel series to Michael J. Sullivan's I think more famous Rhaenyra Chronicles series. It takes place like thousands of years in the future, so this is like a foundational book series. I haven't really read the other series. I'm not technically sure if it's recommended the order I'm doing it, but that's the order I'm doing it, and I love this series so much. I love that there's multiple characters. I love that the series takes place over a longer period of time and we really see the growth of like civilization, and like it's definitely feels like a foundation, and I'm sure and I'm pretty positive that Michael J. Sullivan's gonna build off of the myths and the events that happen in this series. So kind of reading this series with that in mind is also really interesting. And throughout the entire series too, you're constantly reading something called the Book of Bryn, which is one of our main characters who's basically writing and documenting the events of like what is occurring in this particular time period in history. And it's so interesting to like have parts of the story after it's been digested and like written down, but we're also living with the characters in the moment as they are doing things. And as much as they're heroes, they're also so human, and there's folly and there's flaws and there's all of these things to kind of unpack and understand as well. And that's another great thing about this series. Going into the final book, I am curious how he's gonna wrap it all together. And I have a feeling it's gonna be like a hard one to digest and process, not in the way that it's like complicated, but like in an emotional way. I feel like Michael J. Sullivan like gives and he takes, which I personally really appreciate. I feel like the scale of the series has been consistent. And I just have faith it's gonna be a good one in terms of it kind of coming together. But also we know that this is a prequel series, so like it's not necessarily about being the final moment. It's more about being the final moment of this particular point in time in history for the rest of time to kind of like take place in. And that's kind of like the spirit of the series too. Like all of these characters are fighting for the idea of a future. And that's like important to keep in mind. I just love the magic. It's emotional. I love it. I truly do love it so much. And the final book is shaping up to be a really good one. Just quests and warfare and complex like relationship between different groups of people, all-knowing individuals, so much discussion about like gods and the creation of like this world and this place too, which is really, really interesting. I just love this series so much. And I'm almost done with the last one. I feel like I'm gonna have to struggle to not just start the Rhaenyra Chronicles. I don't know if I'm gonna be successful in Matilda at all. I don't know. Dinner is in progress. I have potatoes in the oven, which gotta cook. And then I'm gonna throw my zucchini in. And I'm also marinating a skirt steak, which I'm going to grill. Yum, yum, yum. Out here grilling. I have been grilling so much this summer, despite the fact that it's 104 degrees outside. It's been so fun. Look at that. Yum. Dinner is done. I made a little grilled steak with some chimichurri, baked potato, some summer veg. Delish. Alrighty guys, so the plan is to sit down and finish Age of Empire, the sixth and final book to Legends of the First Empire series, which I'm honestly sad to be finishing it, but I'm so excited to see what's gonna happen. And if for some reason I'm so quick, I have Immortal Longings 2 by Chloe Gong, which I will jump into as well. Billy has joined me. We're gonna have a very cozy reading session tonight. Hi friends, it's tea time in this household before I do a bit of a reading update that is very much long overdue. But I thought while I make this tea, I would do a little PSAs. I feel like I've been trying to include in higher frequency in my videos. So as I mentioned last month, which was Pride Month, July is actually Disability Pride Month, which I think is super cool. So July was picked because in 1990, the ADA was passed, which was legislation which gave civil rights protections to individuals with disability, allowing them to have greater freedom in the workplace and in public spaces. Obviously, this law is just like the beginning of laws that have been passed, need to continue to be passed in the future. But if you're curious why July was picked, that is why. But it is estimated that about 1.3 billion people, about 16% of the worldwide population, lives with some type of disability. More so, 1 in 4 Americans, about 61 million people, live in the United States with some type of disability. With that in mind, given that it's Disability Pride Month, I just kind of wanted to do a general shout out, if you weren't familiar, that is what this month is. Also keep this in mind as we continue to fight for further legislation outside of the current coverage of the ADA, which is definitely needed, and also just to celebrate contributions made by people with disabilities across the world and in the United States this month, and also obviously in future months. There you are. Happy Disability Pride Month, everyone. I'm gonna let this steep. Hi guys, good morning. Let's do a reading update of all I've been able to read so far. So first and foremost, I did finish Age of Empire last night by Michael J. Sullivan. I have read 175 pages so far for this vlog, and I really enjoyed this final installment of this book. I'm trying to utilize all of my willpower to not just immediately jump into the first book to the next series set in this world, especially now that I have all this context and world building from Legends of the First Empire. I feel like my experience with the Rhaenyra Chronicles, I think it's what it's called, will be entirely different. I have like real firsthand accounts of a lot of the myths and stories that I'm sure are gonna be present in that book, and I'm fascinated by that idea. In terms of how this plot all came together, I thought it was done in a really smart way. A lot of the story was about fate and destiny and the creation of a foundation of a new world that we see our characters play within. So they're possibly just shepherding in this new age, but the consequences of everything they did throughout the series is going to be present throughout the rest of time, which is again why I want to read the next series and installment, because I'm not ready to let these world and characters go. I laughed, I cried, I was really pleased with this. I feel like ending fantasy series is very, very difficult. Because you kind of have to focus on tying up loose ends versus like creating new explosive moments, if that makes sense. But I was just like so hooked and attached to everyone in this. How it all came together, it was definitely a bittersweet situation, which I was expecting given the tone of all of the other previous books. I just don't know how Michael J. Sullivan is able to like make me feel so many different things in such quick succession, which I think is just such an interesting skill set. With that in mind, I did start Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. I'm only about 30 pages into this book, and it is a bit of a whirlwind in terms of like trying to figure out what in the world is going on. My glasses are off. Let me put them back on. So Immortal Longings is the first book to, I think, a new series by Chloe Gong. I've heard some people compare this to The Hunger Games. The trial elements specifically kind of give like fight to the death competition vibes, maybe like Squid Games-esque, I'm not sure. But based on the 30 pages I have read, there's a lot of information thrown at you very, very quickly, and it's also a multi-POV novel, so we're digesting that information from a lot of different points of views. This is set in a fantasy landscape, but it's more of like an urban fantasy landscape, and the setting is one that I'm really enjoying. Chloe Gong, while I've not always loved all of her books, I've always thought she was really great at thinking of really interesting settings for all of her books to be placed in, and creating ambiance in those places is also something I feel like she's really good at, and this is no exception. This is like a really interesting fantasy world that has technology. It's very urban, very intensely populated. It's basically like a kingdom ruled by previously 2 kings, but now just 1. The king and the nobles are very, very rich, and it almost has this like landed aristocracy vibe to it, but like the normal civilians all live very crammed and on top of each other. And I would say kind of like how everyone feels stacked on top of each other, and the inclusion of technology, but it still kind of feels a little bit like clunky technology. It kind of gives like cyberpunk vibes. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. The first 30 pages I've read so far, things are moving very quickly, so I feel like the pacing of this book is gonna match that. We're introduced to a variety of characters. First, the heir to the current throne and the current like ruling body, a princess, a runaway princess who has a very storied and complicated past, and then what appears to be kind of a con man who's looking to make a lot of money to help save his like beloved childhood like first love. A couple things right off the bat that I have gleaned outside of this really interesting landscape that this book is going to be taking place in. This is a brutal place. People don't have access to enough food. The city in which people live in is like a hard, dark place outside of the very rich. Most people are just focused on like trying to make enough to survive. The tension within the city is palpable, and one of the things that the crown does to kind of satiate their bloodlust, if you will, is that they host a competition every year where 88 people basically fight to the death, and the last remaining person gets a crap ton of money, which kind of why I like compared it to Squid Games. It also has like Hunger Game vibes, but I think like the capitalistic parallel also makes me think of Squid Games, but it's very dystopian, it's very brutal, there's a lot you can unpack from this competition taking place. Another thing that exists within this world is there is a type of magic that's interesting. Basically, some people have this gene which allows them to body hop. You can possess other people's body, but the length and time and the ability to do so varies wildly from person to person. And it's kind of like common that people like hop a ride on someone else. The only way you're able to tell that someone has taken over someone's body is that your eye color changes when you move to a new body, so that will stay consistent. And people have like identity numbers, which protects them if someone does take over them. The competition itself has not started. I've obviously not read a lot of this book yet, but I'll say from the first 30 pages, I'm very intrigued by this world. I think the setting is very cool, and I'm curious to see how this trial element is going to unfurl. I have a lot of questions still obviously about the characters, their motivations, and that will obviously be told in due time. But I'm optimistic. I don't know, something about the first 30 pages of this captured my attention more than the other books I've read by this author. So we'll just have to wait and see about that. And I think trial plot lines can always be like really nice to read. So we're gonna see. I feel like this book is gonna be very dark. To see how the character writing and the politics go, but first 30 pages, positive. I'm definitely, my interest has been piqued, which I feel like is the most important part for an intro. So not bad. And this also means I've already read 200 pages for the vlog. Ayo. It's lunchtime, and I was really looking out for myself today because I've already done most of the work. I'm making Caesar salads for lunch, and I made a homemade Caesar dressing yesterday. The hardest part is the chicken I'm going to fry up and season, and I also made these homemade breadcrumbs, which I have been having to stop myself from just eating. I hate what I love. Salad spinning is so fun. I don't care what anyone says. And the chicken Caesar salads are done. Hello friends, I have a reading update for you. I have read 100 pages of Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. This book reads fast, and it's also a brutal read, but I'm actually pretty dang interested in it so far, and I so far am liking it better than any Chloe Gong book I have read in the past, which I think is great. So I sort of already mentioned that this is a multi-POV book, which persists. I feel like we have 3 main characters, but we sometimes have perspectives of other characters that are thrown in for additional world building. We have our main character Kala, who is a princess from the previous like rulers who's trying to enact revenge against the current king, like murder him, like kill him off. We have Anton, who, as I said, is kind of this like very free-spirited con man who jumps from body to body to body to body, who is looking to get a lot of money to help his childhood love. And we have August, who is next in line for the throne. All of these people very quickly get intertwined with each other. First off, we have August, who's working with Kala so she can win the tournament that's about to happen, so he can basically have the current king be assassinated with no direct blood on his hands, and it also helps our main character who wants to achieve that. But quickly too, Anton and Kala cross paths, and I believe they're going to form some type of unlikely alliance. Outside of the characters, much of this book has really just been about explaining how the world works, and I would say this book is perhaps a little info dumpy-y. There are long stretches of like lots of context about the politics and how the kingdoms work and how we kind of got to the point to this day. Sure, could it be a little more effortless in its introduction? Yeah, but honestly, I would rather have it than not have it at all. Maybe this is like a bit of fallout on my end from Fourth Wing craving any type of world explanation. So sure, it's a little info dumpy, but it's interesting info dumpy. I think the concept that Chloe Gong has created is a cool one. This sort of hybrid urban fantasy, cyberpunk setting with kind of a traditional kingdom oriented politics. It's interesting and a cool mix of things in terms of what it's influenced by. But the heart of this book is about these trials, which I definitely see the Hunger Game-esque parallels. So basically, as I've already said, 88 people are picked based off of their identity numbers to partake in this competition to fight for the death. The arena, though, is not contained. It takes place over the entire city, and the entire thing is also televised, hence kind of, I guess, the Hunger Game parallels. This is by no means a copy. I'm just using Hunger Games as an example because it's like a well-known example. And it's honestly so dark and disturbing, but it creates for a rather riveting plot, and so far I'm pretty intrigued by it. 2 of our main characters are actively participating in these trials, and they're both very talented in murder, I guess. And they're both like very good at fighting, and they've been training for this particular situation for a very long time. So they're very skilled in their survival instincts. I wouldn't say Chloe Gong spends a lot of time on the like trauma and morality that our characters are just kind of like running through all of these people. But I do feel like there is an overall dialogue of like how screwed up this entire competition is in general. It's basically to satiate the populace with one, violence, and also the off chance that they'll be able to gain a lot of riches presented to them from the government, as most people are crushed by debt, working endless and long hours to no avail, this type of thing. The fact that the entire city is a landscape for these trials is just very interesting to read and also incredibly intense. And as the trials progress further, they all wear these like wristbands that they're assigned a number, but they begin to ping each other when they're in close proximity to someone else who they need to like kill. There's like unlikely alliances being formed. And again, alongside all of this, the magic system being able to jump from body to body is continuing to persist. And this magic is also just a really fascinating one and adds yet another layer to this whole competition. Because it's happening in the city, there are so many civilian casualties and civilians that get pulled into this competition to the death, regardless of their consent or not, painting an even darker picture of just what is happening in the city at large. And there's political stuff happening behind the scenes. Obviously, we have a character who's wanting to overthrow the current government with a new one, but in a lot of ways, like maintaining the current power structure because he just wants to be king himself. So there's just like a lot to unpack. I'm entertained. This book is dark, but I'm intrigued by the characters and I like how much it's jumping around. And I just think the setting is very good. I'm really pleased. I wasn't sure how I was gonna feel about Chloe Gong's writing in this, and I'm glad I'm continuing to give her another try because I always enjoyed her style and her settings. I just didn't totally vibe with her previous series, but so far I'm liking this. I love how convoluted it is. I love how kind of complicated the magic system is. I feel like my issue with her previous book was that there wasn't a very like distinct feel to her magic system and it wasn't very explained. This is like almost the opposite in a way that I like. Like I feel like some people might read this and be like, the magic system's confusing. Like, how does it work? There's a lot of rules and I love it. I love dissecting all of the rules. I like to see how the whole thing works. I think the concept is strong and it's very nuanced and she explains it where like I feel like I have to pay attention and I like that feeling. So honestly, I'm impressed. I'm liking this book. I'm really feeling jazzed about it. I love when I don't want to say like, oh, I'm surprised. That feels condescending, but I just wasn't sure. And I love that it's taking a positive direction. So I'm hoping it maintains this direction, but of course I will continue to check in. I've read almost 300 pages so far, which I'm also really pleased with. Obvious post-dinner ice cream and, oh, it just went away. But I've started Love Island season 10 and I'm so excited about it. Hello, I am reading in bed. I have just passed the 140 page mark and I'm really liking this book. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I am finding it to be really, really entertaining. One thing I wanted to specifically mention is that I like how actually morally gray all the characters are. I feel like that can be tossed around a bit, but I feel like Chloe Gong is really going for it in this book. And I feel like it also might be something to do with the genre. This is adult fantasy, and I feel like the characters themselves are super flawed, but still very, very interesting. And they're all flawed in very different ways. We have Kala, who is the princess who's seeking out revenge. She's bloody, but like not in the like charming, I've trained my whole life kind of way. Like brutal, has killed people in cold blood, including people that she's known her entire life, and we don't fully understand why. And even if she is morally right in that they're evil people, like her ability to shut off like her emotions to kill them is still like a little frightening, you know what I mean? We have Anton, who's this sort of flippant guy who from a moral standpoint has no issues like jumping from body to body to body to body, taking over people's lives, taking advantage of them, doing whatever he feels that he needs to do, and also killing people. But yet, he has a bit of a heart there too, because he has this childhood love and also a past that we're still trying to unpack and be murky. And then lastly, we have August, who is still trying to uphold this monarchy, this system that is inherently evil, and be a part of something that's taking advantage of countless people and civilians in his kingdom. And while he wants to change the system, he doesn't want to overthrow the system. He still wants the power for himself. So like, I don't know, all the characters are interesting in the way that none of them are perfect. And in fact, I would probably argue that they're all like bad people, but it doesn't make them uninteresting and it doesn't make them not likable to read from their perspective. And I appreciate that these characters are like not straightforward in that way. And are really complicated and like it's pretty dark. Like a lot of the stuff that's happening is like pretty dark and not morally ambiguous, like morally dark. Like it's kind of in the same vein like you read Joe Abercrombie books and the characters all do so many terrible things that you still find them compelling. It's kind of what's going on here and I like it. So I'm gonna keep going. The setting is shining. The setting is shining. Anywho, I'm gonna read more before I fall asleep. I have a latte. let's do a reading update. It's kind of like late morning, early afternoon. I'm having one of those days where I'm just like anxious for no reason. Well, that's not true. I'm spiraling about things I can't control and are also like unproven. I'm having a destination wedding and like in my head I'm like, oh, but what if like we get there and we don't really actually have a venue and no one has anywhere place to stay and everyone flew all the way over there, blah, 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 blah. There's no proof that any of that's gonna happen, but my brain is spiraling. I should probably stop drinking caffeine. But in other news, I've read 2/3 of Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong, and I'm really liking this book. It's kind of like just a really good vibe. It's definitely not perfect, but like the good is definitely outweighing the bad, and it's like kind of blinding me to the parts that are like maybe not so perfect because I'm just really entertained by the story. I'm interested by the characters. They all have very murky and mysterious pasts, and I just want to know what they are. And I know this is gearing up to have like a huge reveal, and I also want to know what it is. Like I'm just along for the ride. I like the writing, I like the setting, I like the characters, I like the concept. This to me is like, yes, Chloe Gong, yes. So I'm just happy I'm enjoying it as much as I am. Like probably not a 5-star read, but like it's definitely leaning in like the 4-star direction and one that I recommend. So anywho, I'm gonna read more. I'm not gonna like nightmare scenario any more upcoming major life events. I'm just gonna like, I don't know, lie to myself, pretend, not lie. I'm just gonna read books about, you know, a dystopian, fantastical future instead. And make lunch, probably, and watch Love Island. Ah, yes, that'll be the cure. Love Island, everyone. So anyway, that's where we're at. 2/3 of the way through. I've read 230 pages plus 170 pages. That's 400 pages. Hey, it's only Wednesday, small win. Hi friends, it's time for lunch and we are saved by my tamales this week. Clay and I have another order of tamales, which we adore. And I have worked with them in the past, but this is non-sponsored. Today we're having classic Italian meatballs in penne. I'm gonna throw this in the oven. I'm gonna watch some Love Island, and then I'm gonna do more reading of my Chloe Gong book, which I feel like I'm making really good progress. And away it goes. And while this cooks, I'm gonna go watch Love Island. Isn't that right, Millie? It's Love Island time, girly pop. Yum, yum, yum. Piping hot. I'm gonna go eat this, watch a little more Love Island, and then get back to work. Sometimes life calls for a big old bucket of chicken fingers and ranch and mac and cheese. Good morning. Matilda stole my spot. She's so sneaky like that. Hello friends, good morning. I have 65 pages left of Immortal Longings. And this book had like a steamy scene in it, which I wasn't expecting. I'm curious, I feel like there's definitely overall in the bookish world an increase in popularity and romantasy and just like steamy romance in general. So going into this book, this is like a typical fantasy. I was expecting maybe some romance, but not necessarily a steamy scene. So it's interesting to see maybe some crossover of that popularity in like just general fantasy novels, which I wouldn't say I mind. It wasn't prolonged or it's interesting because this book doesn't have the trappings of a romantasy, but the author just sort of pushed the steaminess a bit more than I was necessarily expecting, which was kind of a fun surprise. Also, it definitely makes me happy because I love reading romantasy, but sometimes I'm not super enthused by the plots. So it's cool to have a book that has kind of some steamy romance, but it's definitely a subplot and we still have a really interesting fantasy world at play. I'm flying through this book. Again, this book isn't perfect, but I'm finding it so entertaining that it's like easier for me to like look past the flaws. I will say the end pacing has definitely picked up, and I feel like we're kind of rushing through some things that maybe need a little more elaboration, but I feel like this book is like all plot, no thoughts. Like I'm not really thinking about a lot of the flaws. I'm just here for the ride. It's probably gonna be like a 3.75 4-star read, but like I like the characters, I like the setup. I feel like we're gonna have an explosive ending, and I'm just like really entertained. Like I feel like it's really checking a lot of boxes for a like steamy, fun, dark, very entertaining fantasy read. Like, no, it's not making my favorite fantasy of all time. It's not necessarily blowing my mind, but like I'm having a great time. I'm having a great time. It's almost like, how do I describe this? Like, this book is an adult fantasy book, and it's almost like Chloe Gong has taken the fun elements of like what she succeeds in YA, some elements of what's really popular in kind of romantasy, new adult fantasy, and was like, but I'm gonna write a fantasy novel with an interesting world, pretty dang good world building, a compelling like action plot line that is coherent and makes sense. So it's just like this really cool hybrid novel of like a lot of different like popular elements that you typically see in like other places and not necessarily in traditional adult fantasy, and I like it. I hope we get more stuff like this because I am so entertained. I'm having a great time, you know? So anyway, that's that. I'm gonna sit down now and finish this book. I think it's like 360 some odd pages, plus that'll put me well over the 500 page mark, and then I'll be able to start my third book of the day, which I'm also pretty jazzed about. I didn't vlog much yesterday, which I apologize for. I was feeling a little anxious and I just could not shake it, so I just watched Love Island and ate chicken fingers instead of like trying to comprehend the world at all. But you know, we're back, baby. We are back. And I'm gonna finish Immortal Longings. What's that TikTok song? Girl dinner, but girl dinnering for lunch. Hello, we have another coffee in hand reading update next to my espresso machine. Actually, I'm gonna set this down. Ignore this. I shouldn't have gotten this, but I did because I felt like treating myself. But unrelated to this reading update I'm about to do, I did also actually buy the vanilla syrup from Starbucks to have with my espresso machine so I can start duping Starbucks lattes at home. But anyway, I have finished Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong, and I really liked it. I don't know, it was fun, it was entertaining, I liked the writing style. I'm so happy I gave this author another try. The ending was a banger. I really don't know where this book is going to go. I think I stand by what I probably said would be my rating of this book, like a 3.75 stars, not quite 4 stars, but I was still like really entertained by it. And I enjoyed it a lot more than These Violent Delights, which I've read by her previously. So I don't know. I mean, if you want something that's gonna completely like pull you in, grip you, this is not a super long book, but had a lot of like action and plot payoff, I would highly recommend this. It was truthfully a delight, which is great. It's great in my opinion. Big fan, big fan. But that does mean I can move on to my third book of this vlog, and I'm not entirely sure what it is I feel like picking up at this exact moment in time, but I'm happy that I finished 2 so far, so that is a win. Plans for the rest of the day is I need to work, and then we are seeing a particular movie tonight at the movie theaters. We had pre-ordered our tickets to see Barbie, of course, so that's what we're going to do. I think our showing's at like 9:45 at night, so it's a little bit later, and I just love movie theater popcorn so much, and I love eating at the Alamo Draft House that I'm like trying to weigh my options. I'm like, dinner at 9:45 at night is late, but like, isn't that what Europeans do? That's just bide my time, you know what I mean? But anywhoosies, I'm gonna go wrap up work. I've just wrapped up my book, which I'm super pleased with, and I'll keep y'all posted. Okay, toodle. Hi guys, it's Reagan, and welcome to the end of the vlog, the next day. So let's just quickly wrap up everything I was able to read over the course of this vlog. I feel like I was pretty in depth, but you know, we gotta wrap it up. So first and foremost, I read the last 175 pages of Age of Empire by Michael J. Sullivan, the 6th and final book to the Legends of the First Empire series, one of my favorite series, and I'm so proud of myself too for being so consistent. And look at me, I finished a 6-book series in less than a year. I was on top of my TBR for once in my life. This was honestly a pretty dang solid finish for a fantasy series. I always feel like final books are generally speaking my least favorite, but I still really loved this journey so much. If you haven't checked out this series, I highly recommend you do so. I'm not gonna wax poetic about it for too much longer. From there, I read the entirety of Immortal Longings, which is a brand new release by Chloe Gong. Her adult fantasy debut came out, I wanna say like last week or something like that. Here's the deal with this book. I really was so entertained by it. Definitely not a perfect fantasy release, but at the same time though, I could not put this book down. Plot forward, interesting characters, great tension, some fun romance, a really interesting world and setting. I will be reading the sequel. I enjoyed this quite a bit, like almost 4 stars. If you want like something that is like well constructed, but also a book that you can easily fall into, just be like purely entertained, this is a great book to pick up. And then lastly, I did read 40 pages of The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. I have not read enough of this book to really give you my thoughts and feelings, but so far, so good. The writing style in particular is like very unique and it feels like it's gonna be very, very immersive. So I will be continuing with this in a later reading vlog because I am really enjoying it. So that is the plan. Alrighty guys, I read a total of 580 pages. Not bad for a week's work if you ask me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye.